meeting is now This meeting is now being recorded, and the recording will be available on the NASW New Jersey YouTube channel, and we will also be sending the recording out to everybody who registered, so you have access to it as well. Again, this is today's community conversation, talking to kids about gun violence with Nancy Kislin. Nancy's going to speak for a little bit, and then we'll open the field up for Q&A. You can enter your questions in the chat box, or I think we may be able to have the opportunity to have people come off the line and unmute and speak to Nancy directly too. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Nancy. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to talk to you all, fellow social workers, a badge of honor that I've worn for over 30 years now. So I'm Nancy Kislin. I spend my days in virtually these days working with children, middle school, high school, and their families is what I say. And I really like to start with, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty exhausted these days. So why don't, some of you I can see, some of you I can't, but if you want just to close your eyes, if you're comfortable, I'm gonna close my eyes, I'm gonna put my hands on my lap, let go, put my cell phone down, and just close my eyes and take a few deep breaths in and out. And I'm gonna ground myself. And what does that mean? I'm gonna feel the energy on my feet, push my feet into the ground, center myself, let all those thoughts and all my to-dos go aside. And for the next half hour or so, let us be really present with each other. Let us nurture, and if I can help you, feed yourself, appreciate and validate you, because these are really hard times. And I know I don't speak for just myself. So let's take a few more deep breaths in and out. And as we begin this journey, we're going to talk about some of the hardest things. And I am so passionate about this topic because I think it speaks whether we're talking about gun violence or the recent mass shooting or a scary lockdown drill. What we're essentially talking about is how do we help raise resilient children? How do we, in our job, in our badge of social worker, do we help families? Do we help community? Do we help the children become resilient, flexible, adaptable, empathetic, kind? And one of the ways we do that is we have to acknowledge where things aren't working so well. And one of the places it's not working so well, I believe, is that we're traumatizing so many children, whether, of course, it's the children who just survived in Texas, but how many other children are being traumatized by seeing it on their TikTok feed or seeing it flash on their social media feed or hearing the news run constantly in their family's living room. Or my topic essentially has been about how the monthly school lockdown drills or school security drills can be potentially traumatizing. So with that said, I want you, if you have a piece of paper next to you, I know we all use electronics, but I'm still big on the notebook because I think there's something that happens when we take a pen and a piece of paper, and we give that extra second to write down. And I want you to take a clean piece of paper and I want you to write down self-care. How are you doing with self-care? Ooh, it's sort of like a taboo word, right? I don't have time for such. I don't know, I say it too, right? I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. But if we, especially right now in this world of COVID and everything else, if we don't make 5 minutes to check in with yourself, how am I doing? What do I need? What's my body feeling? I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling angry, I need a cup of tea. Those simple things. And one of my teachers years ago taught me that I need to make sure in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. If I can do it any other time, that's awesome. But if I don't nurture my mind and body, how do I expect it to do all that I expect it to do? So number one was self-care. Two, let's get right to the topic. How to talk to kids about what just happened, whether it's what happened in Texas, or it's some other horrific shooting, or it's even a scary situation that happened in your immediate community. I like to start with the foundation of self-care, right? So I want you as the therapist, you as the parent or grandparent, to remember your self-care exercise. So hopefully it's a couple minutes journaling, it's a kind of mindful meditation, whatever your practice is. And I think of that as I'm building up my battery for the day. So then if I'm sitting with a family and I'm going to ask, and I'll guide you through this, but I'm going to ask a question about, how are you feeling? What are your thoughts? What are you thinking about what just happened in Texas? I better make sure, or I encourage you to make sure that you come from a place of calm, that your emotion and your rage and all those amazing emotions that you're certainly entitled to have don't come flying out of your mouth. Because that, I don't know if you're like that, but sometimes when I get so passionate about something, it's like I just can flood someone else. Okay, so that's why go back to that little self-care, go back to your reserve. Okay, so I know this has been a pretty tough week. What are you thinking about the events of the last week? I had a cutie patootie 10-year-old on the phone last night and for a session, and I didn't know if he knew. And he starts with, I can see him, Nancy, this was a really bad week. Okay, remember my self-care, remember my breathing. Because in my mind, oh my gosh, this kid saw everything about the shooting. He heard, he saw. Nope, I took a few deep breaths. I like to hold things in my hand, whether it's a crystal or I grasp my hands, and I waited. And you know what? It had nothing to do with the shooting. This kid knew nothing about what happened in Texas, as far as I'm concerned. So the second thing I want you to do is educate yourselves. And if we had a couple hours, I would do this for you, but you can go to my website and there's lots of articles. But I want you to know as much as you can, whether you work with only adults or you work with kids and adults, anyone who works with anyone needs to know what the school security drills look like these days. So, for example, in New Jersey, we're one of 42 states that mandate at least one scheduled drill per month, in addition to a fire drill. That means there's a lockdown drill, evacuation drill, shelter in place. Now that's once a month, but that is separate from if there is something scary just happened outside and there was a robbery and they needed to lock down the school. That doesn't count because that's a real, quote, lockdown. So I want you to know a lot about this subject. My book is a great resource. Please, anyone who's interested, I'm happy to give you a copy. I just feel like as social workers, we need to know this. Put your info into the chat or email me at nancyktherapy@gmail.com and tell me your address and I'll send you off a free copy of the book. Education is so key. Now let's jump into how do you have some of these sacred conversations. So right now I'm going to talk to you first as a parent. So I'm going to roll and then tell me if you like this and if you could imagine yourself doing this with a client.
Nancy, could I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry. I put the link to your website in the chat. Could you give me your email address again so I can put that?
Actually, that's perfect. Because then if they sign up right there, it'll go to my email. Or
Okay.
if, you know what, just put Nancy at nancykislin.com. Okay.
At nancykislin.com.
Yep. And for you all listening, if anyone has a question as we're going along, I'm fine with you putting it in the chat box. So if anyone has a question. So
Thanks,
now,
Nancy.
remind me what I was saying. So I'm pretending that you are my client, you all, and you come in for your session, and I'm going to ask you, hey, have you talked to your children about the latest school shooting? Silent. Don't flood them with my information. Don't share all my bubbling energy here. Oh, no, my kids are fine. I have 3 boys. They don't pay attention. I got that twice this week. But boys don't pay attention to this. Okay, acknowledge, validate, I hear you. Oh, okay. Do you know, like, the last time they had a lockdown drill at school? Oh, I don't know. Does my kid's school have lockdown drills? Then remember, you just did some education. You now know that, oh, they live in New Jersey, for example. Yes, once a month they have some kind of lockdown drill. Okay, you can give them more information. But again, I always say lead by curiosity. I am so curious what this parent knows about the school security drills. I want to know even more about what they think their kid knows about it. Their kid has any reaction. Oh, my kid's so anxious. They're afraid of everything. Okay, so let's say you get one of those, it's fine, it's fine. Acknowledge, and there you have a choice. Is this relevant? Well, is this relevant? Let's say you think it is because the mom's complaining or stating that the child has so much anxiety. So here, if someone throws the word anxiety, if a child has anxiety, depression, there is no doubt in my mind, and from the thousands of interviews I've done, where every child I've interviewed has something to say about their experience during lockdown drills. I'll say that again, I'm not exaggerating. Every child from age 4 to in college that I've interviewed over the last couple of years, they may say, which a lot did, I'm fine. But that kid next to me, she used to cry every time we were hiding under the desk. Or, oh my God, one time a kid peed in his pants in class. I heard that a few times. So I like to start with the curiosity because you want to guide that parent to get curious, that they go home and they start asking their children. And I have some like basic tips where, have them put their phone down, put their iPad down, look their child in the eye, create a space to have this important conversation. And those are my same tips, whether we're talking about, you're going to talk to them about sex, or you're going to talk sexuality, or in this case, school shootings and lockdowns. So maybe it's a time you're driving in the car, or just find a quiet time. And I say that parents often are like, the kid will do this. It's our children's job to go to push us away, right? Give the shrug, look around the room. Don't be defeated. Same thing as the therapist, lead by curiosity. I also like I statements. I saw on Facebook today that some kids in our community were in lockdown. They had a lockdown in school. Someone had called in what turned out to be a threat, but it was fine. I got really scared. I was really scared when I saw that. Did you hear about that? Stop, pause. Mom, this is weird. I don't want to talk to you about it. Okay, I hear you, but do you think any of your friends ever get scared? Like, has that ever happened to you? And then it's like planting a seed and then watering. If you get the real big pushback from client or your own child, okay, just note to self, you're going to come back. It's not a race. It's not a sprint, right? You're on it for the long haul. Your goal is to be a point person that your child can talk to you about these kinds of things. Because more than likely, they'll come to you and tell you stories about oh, someone else. Or when I was gathering stories for the book, I'll never forget this young woman came into my office. She knew my research. She was right there in the beginning. And she said to me, we had a lockdown drill today, Nancy. It was a S show. I won't say the word. And I said, why? She goes, well, I guess it wasn't a planned one. And when the voice came over the loudspeaker and said, this is a lockdown, she dove under to the desk and said, run for it. You're on your own, kids. And so we talked about that. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it for all the obvious reasons, but also is we don't know what was going on inside that child. We don't know what was happening in that teacher's mind. We don't know what trauma baggage she carries with her. We don't know any of that story. And when I helped that child kind of look outside, then she shared times when she was really anxious, and it became a healthy conversation. So I do see there's a question. How do we talk to children, especially anxious children, when there is a threat made against their school? So I'm assuming this is after the threat happened that day at school, right? So we're having this happen in the recent history. So I don't know if any of you live near where I do, but this happened the day after the shooting in Texas in the community I live in. And I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw a high school boy posted, we're in lockdown. Does anyone know what's going on? And you can imagine the rest. So I can tell you more about that in a second. But in terms of that, again, lead by curiosity, right? Because often when we have an anxious client, or particularly our own children, if we meet them where they're at, so if they're anxious, the danger is we meet them where they're at, right? That's why you want to make sure you're ready for this conversation and just get curious. Go into the details. What did it feel like in your body? What were your thoughts? What was that self-talk? What were you saying? I don't want to think about it. Oh, okay. Age appropriate, or any age. I like pens. I always have different color pens. Do you want to write it down? Do you want to draw it? Do you want to use Play-Doh? When I had my in-person office, I always had a gallon of Model Magic Play-Doh markers, because some of us aren't so good at saying it, but we can write it and then tell about it. But I think, so I know you are all thinking like, I know how to do this, but what happens specifically when it's such a direct hit is how I'm reading that question. Like, oh my God, now this is all out there in TV land, but now this happened to me. And what I find is to really create that space for the child to take you through their experience. What did the room feel like? What was the teacher? Where was the teacher? What were your friends doing? And taking them back through that traumatic event can be so powerful, so healing, because, and I talk a lot about this in the book, there's our little T's, we call it the small T's, the small traumas, and the big traumas. And what you and I can go through the same thing, and I have a big T, it becomes a pretty traumatic event, meaning it's imprinted on my mind, it's right there on my subconscious, and I can access that, and it may even directly direct choices I make in my life, versus how come you can go through the same experience and it's a little T for you. And what we know from trauma is that a child, anybody, but particularly a child, having one person, at least one person, to be that safe person where they can talk to about their experience, whether it be you, the therapist, you, the school social worker, you, the parent, grandparent, whoever you are, to be that safe person. And what does that mean to be the safe person? That you're sort of brave enough to have this conversation and to let the child just show up and be like, wow, I never hid in a closet. Like I said this so often to the kids I were interviewing. I never had that experience. Can you tell me what it's like? And often it's so uncomfortable, and trust me, you're gonna hear things that are gonna make you go, oh my God, that's what that lady was talking about. They're going to be upsetting. You're going to get outraged because there are a lot of outrageous things happening right here in New Jersey about how teachers and school districts are empowering children to be martyrs or to, defend themselves and do things. But at that time, you can channel that, and I'll give you places to channel that, but right there is, I want you to hear that child. I want you to show up. Same thing with the parent. If you're having this conversation and your client is talking to you about their child who's so anxious, how do you help them through that? Tell me, anyone, is this helpful? Am I answering the question? It's hard because I don't get to see everybody's faces. No, just a few.
Allison, did you want to unmute to clarify your question a little?
Hi.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm speaking more about when a threat is made against your child's school and you don't know what they've heard from friends or whatnot. How do you speak to them so that A, they're not going into school kind of blind,
Right.
where they're going to hear stuff from other kids and you didn't prepare them ahead of time, but you don't, you also want to reassure them that they're safe, but that's also really hard to speak to right now, right? So that's kind of more what I'm saying, especially with the anxious children. It's like a balance of preparing them, but also, not, you want them to feel like they want to go back to school. That's kind of more the guidance that I'm looking for.
Elementary school? Are you talking about?
Older, middle school.
Okay. So let me just make sure. So it's like the threat.
I know that's super specific. I don't want to
sidetrack
you, but
no, I think it's so important because, like I said, it just happened here in my community. And I've been trying to talk to as many parents as possible. And your question is one I've been doing a lot of talks, as you can imagine, in the last week. So let me break it down though. So it's, hey, child says to parent, I'm scared to go to school. There was just not only what happened in Texas, like now this is close to home. This is my school. So then I would take them through what was the threat, like as uncomfortable as that is, but am I jumping too far ahead? Do they already know the threat happened? No. So then I would start with that. If they're already in middle school, I would assume that they're going to hear, because I feel like nothing's private anymore. Like if you're telling me first grade, but right. So I would say, and again, check yourself before, be really present, quiet, uninterrupted time, and just be like, I want to share, I try to be always so honest with you. I want to share something. Again, less is more, not too much information. It seems like somebody they thought it would be a good prank, a silly prank, and they called in a threat to the school. Stop. Did you hear anything about that? Maybe she or he already did. Get curious, get the information. No, Mom, I didn't hear anything about it. Some kids, why are you telling me this, right? Okay, I'm telling you this because I thought it's better for you and I to talk about it. And we could talk about, like, what are your thinking? What are your thoughts? What would you do if you are, what ifs are good. What would you do if you were in a classroom and it comes on, it's not the drill, it is a threat. Like the kids, this was here in Watchung Hills. I don't know, was it the same school district you're in? No. So what if that happened to you? What would you do? And I think I'm sorry, people are outside my window, sorry. What would you do? And here is the place where this is an opportunity, as horrible as it is, to talk about building resilience with our kids, building flexibility. You know what? What would you do? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. It makes me too anxious. I totally hear you. What do you think your friends would do? What do you think your teacher would do? Let's have a plan. Let's have, what would be a backup plan for the child? Do you want to, you could always text me. What if I don't pick up? Who's the second person, the third person? If you would have told me I would ever suggest this 10 years ago, I would have told you no way. But in today's world, and after interviewing kids from Parkland, pretty recent after the shooting there, the kids that were able to text their parents were able to stay pretty much like hold it together. Yeah. And think, because really what we want our kids to do is be able to think, right? We want them to stay calm. And I think as horrible as the subject is, which doesn't get much horrible, these are lifelong skills, right? There's going to be crises. You're going to fail a test. There's, things like that. There was a second part to your question though, was how do we let them feel safe in school? And that's a big question right now. And for all the people like me out there talking, we do have to remember this is our kids are safe in school, right? This terrible thing was beyond words, but just like there's car accidents, there's airplanes, like we have to remind them that this is not the majority, that this is not the masses happening to, and that depending on age too is, who are the people they feel safe with at school? Who do they talk to at school? That's why I want you beforehand to know what is your child's school's policy on safety so that you can talk intelligently. And then I believe with my full heart that action, that helping children feel a sense of power in this very scary world we're living in is how they stay grounded and feel okay. So what do I mean by that is introduce gratitude. Like, what are we grateful for? I'm so glad you have a cell phone or a watch so that's even an option that you can text me. What other things are you grateful for? And then what can we do? When my girls were coming of age, I felt like I was always playing ping pong with them and I was always serving it back. Like, what do I can't believe this happened. Okay, Gabrielle, what are you going to do about it? What do you think? And that can be so empowering. Plus, let them see that they're not alone in this. So for example, somewhere during this past year, we started a nonprofit. It's called Just Call It a Drill, meaning I believe that every time there's a lockdown drill, it should be called a drill. So if any of you have any kids who want to get involved, right now we're just New Jersey based, but it's a team-led board. I'm the advisor, and we're doing some pretty awesome stuff, but it also gives them a place to feel empowered. Or Moms Demand Action has a team group. Brady United, who I do a lot of work with, they have a team group. Or have your child, even if they're not interested in this issue, like go help the homeless people. Like find something that's bigger than yourself, I believe is so critically important. So now tell me, does that answer your question? Is that more helpful? And to know that you're not alone in this. And I think that the struggle we're having in having these conversations, we need to not push aside because it's a real struggle that we need to pay attention to because our children deserve to live in a world that's not like this. Like we can't lose sight of that. So it's like we're working two sides of the issue. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? So I can go back to talking about some other talking points.
We just got a question, Nancy. We just got a question in the chat from Tiffany. Do you recommend bringing it up with younger kids or waiting for them to ask you about it? K to second grade range.
K to second. Thank you, Tiffany, for that question. K to second is really young. So if your child hasn't seen it on the news, which I hope they haven't, and I would wait for them to bring it up with you, because developmentally, I'm not sure how a little kindergartner can even process the enormity of what happened. But let's take it another way. Let's say someone in class brought it up, or a teacher. Like one of my daughters found out about 9/11 while the nightmare was unfolding because her second grade teacher told the kids that one of the World Trade Center buildings just collapsed. And we lived a half hour from New York City. My daughter will still tell you how she felt in that time. Whoops, I don't fault the teacher, she was traumatized. But so here's a story I'll tell real quick. So one of the moms, I was doing some program, and she said, I decided not to tell my 10 and 11-year-old boys. And she said one day at pickup, one of her sons came running out of school and said, Mommy, did you know there was this shooting and all these kids in Florida got killed? Oops, what does she do? And the other moms looked at her like, how did you not tell us? And I would say there's no wrong or right answer here. Know your child. But without knowing your children, Tiffany, I would say K to second makes me like less is more. Does anyone have any other opinions on that? I welcome to hear that as well. Okay, so let's go back to one other talking. Great. Let's say right now, as always, is structure and boundaries are really helpful for kids. So let's say a child, you pick the age, heard about this, they're seeing too many things on their social media feed, which is a good tip. Go over their technology world with them, set limits and structure. Say, you know what, with everything happening right now, why don't you get off that? You know, take a break from Snapchat or take a break from the YouTube videos. Help them make structure and boundaries because they need that right now. This is an overwhelming time. Another really good way to talk to kids is, I probably said this already, but use open-ended statements. Use those I statements, use stories about when you were a child. Kids love hearing your stories about when you were young. They might roll their eyes, but they always tell me in sessions, I don't know if any of you have that similar, like, oh my God, my mom, she did this or this. And I'm like, your mom probably has no idea. You think that it was cool. They're like, no. So it takes, you know, when I was little, we had these fire drills, and one day there was a fire in the kitchen or the cafeteria, you know, kind of show them through example how you felt about it. Any other questions? Let's see, did I forget any of my tips? Yes, I forgot one other big thing. So going back to, I want you to be educated, is this education to me goes right into advocacy. So, okay, now you're building this bottle, this container of information. What are you going to do with it? And I could give you a quick list. You can IM me. I have articles about it. It's in my book. But right now, and I can put this link, I'm putting the link just now in somewhere back pre-COVID, I decided that we needed to make this a bill, make it law in New Jersey, that every school, that every child deserves the right to know that it's just a drill. Meaning, this is a lockdown drill. This is a red alert drill. This is an active shooter drill. So I worked really hard with some of my little friends in high places, the Brady United especially. And on January 10th, Governor Murphy signed into law. But unfortunately, right before it came out of the Senate being signed, somebody, and I still don't know who, change the language at the last half second so that the bill passed minus one very critically important thing, where now it's still, if your child is in a school where they're still saying, hey kid, it's a lockdown, contact me, I will help you, we will fight this. Because the bill, Governor Murphy thought it passed that just call it a drill. But in that are some other really important things that I've been advocating for, and this is what you can do as a parent, and you can educate your clients who are parents, is one, I want you to find out if they call it a drill. If not, they don't, I'll help you with the language. I'll even give you a sample email. Two is, I want you to find out how long those drills last. Three is, I want you to know what are the children being instructed to do. This is critically important. Are your children being told to throw that Google Chromebook at them? Are they being told, hey, there's a basket of rocks and bats in the corner, and when that shooter comes, you throw it? Those are things that happen here in New Jersey and still happen. Thanks to this bill, no longer is it legal to do active shooter drills. What is an active shooter drill? That's an example of when a police officer or a volunteer dresses as a shooter and carries often a real gun, just not loaded, and pretends to be the shooter. We all know that is ridiculously traumatizing, potentially traumatizing to teachers and children. So find out if your school's doing that. What did I leave off? Find out, this is now in a law. So you should be getting an email by the end of the day that a drill happened in my daughter's school, my son's school. It was a lockdown drill, it was an evacuation drill, it lasted this long. That's so important. So now when you pick up your child or your client picks up their child, they now know that this happened, and they know it's on their mind that they can have this conversation. Remember the little T's and the big T's there. I have some other points there, but those are the main questions. I believe that if, I got it, happened in Milburn, Chatham, South Orange, Maplewood, all these school districts that I've consulted with, Wharton, they all have adapted this where just call it a drill. So if any of you know, I'd love to hear and put it in the chat. Does your child's school call it a drill? So also you can follow, the kids have a Instagram, I forgot for a second, called Just Call It a Drill. And we're actually actively doing a survey right now. So those are some things you can do. And I would say do that with your child. Like, don't do this behind their back. This is great talking points. Like, hey, you know what? I just listened to a lady speak about this. I didn't know that they actually still make you think it's a real drill sometimes. Stop, listen. Anyone have any questions? Am I talking too fast? Am I doing okay, Jeff? What if your child is afraid to go to school because what they saw on TV? I'm so sorry. I have heard that all too often this past week. I would highly encourage you to help them break down what they saw and what their self-talk is saying and where are they going with those thoughts. So you can start to gauge like, wow, this is really up there. Say, let's think together of what we can do to make you feel safe. You know what? Maybe you go in age of, like, depends on the age, of course, because your high schooler might not want you to come with them, but can you set up a meeting with the vice principal or the principal or even the superintendent or a local youth detective? Like, you know, children are so smart and they're like little sponges. So right now, your child, unfortunately, probably absorbed so much scary stuff that triggered them. So how do we help fill in some healthy things there? Like, oh wait, that school did, our school has this, or in the history of New Jersey, for example, I don't want to jinx, there's never been a school shooting. There's never been a mass shooting in New Jersey. Oh, what do you think of that? Allison, did someone have a question? No, sorry, I got all excited. And I think also is to help, really sit with what is it that you need from me as your parent that I can do to help you make schools feel okay. You might not feel like you did before. It might take a while, but I would be pretty tough on getting that child back to school as soon as you can. And as you know, maybe you widen your team. Maybe there's the school counselor, therapist, like whoever you need to bring into your inner circle to help that child. Something else, if I have time to tell this story, I call her Isabel. It's not her real name. And when I was doing a training of mental health professionals, not too far from Parkland, Florida, pre-COVID, I had a question like this come up, and I'll tell you the story. A mom raised her hand and she says, my daughter, 15 at the time, was en route from the bathroom to her classroom when a lockdown happened. Now, any of you know, just put in the box if you do, what happens to a child if she is en route from anything in the hallway when a lockdown happens? Does anyone know what happens to that child? Anybody? So the teachers do what the teachers are told, and the teachers lock the door. They open the door, make sure anyone who is there, and then they lock the door. Right, someone said they are all locked out and told to go to a bathroom. So now we're seeing that here's one of my talking points is the inconsistency. There's such inconsistency of what children are supposed to do. And our kids are so smart. And in the inconsistency, if the adults don't even know what to tell the kids, that feeds anxiety. Wouldn't that make you anxious? That makes me crazy. So I just heard last week or 2 weeks ago, pre the shooting in Texas, that New Jersey changed it, that they used to tell the teachers to open the door and gather kids in. But now someone's decided that's too dangerous. So they lock the doors. They don't even give the kid the chance, if they're right there, to pull them in. I'm not saying teachers do this. I'm saying what their messaging is. Okay, so back to Isabel. Isabel did what Isabel was trained to do. She ran to the nearest door. It was locked. Next door was locked. The next door. Isabel was in a high school 20 minutes from Parkland, Florida. Her school district was instructed not to have any drills that year. Isabel was found in a fetal position, screaming, I'm going to die, when the drill all clear came. When the mom, who was a fellow therapist, was in my training, she said she was unable to get her daughter back to school all these weeks later. And I share that story everywhere I can because Isabel did what she was supposed to do. The teachers did what the teachers were supposed to do. The system is failed. Just call it a drill. The kid would have probably been pretty shaken up because of what happened, but she probably wouldn't have been scared to death that she was going to die. And this is where our place as social workers, there's never been a time where we need to be empowered to make change on whatever issue, but especially, obviously, I'm biased to this issue. So I'm just going to, before I go to the last question, it says, someone said, go to the nearest classroom. Yes. Or they're told to go back to the bathroom. The problem is if we were in a room full of teens, which I've done, and someone brings this up or I bring this up, you know what they say? We're going to get shot when we're running back to the bathroom. That's what happened in Parkland. The kids who got locked out ran back to the bathroom and they got shot. How do you respond to that? How do we? And those are the hardest questions because our kids this topic is so different than so many because our kids are right. They're right. There's no perfect answer. And that's where we can put the focus on, I don't know if you guys are familiar with see something, say something. That's, I think it's a service that's from Sandy Hook Promise, that find out if your school districts have that, where it's a thing on the, it's a service where the kids, let's say I'm at lunch or I go to the bathroom and I hear a kid talking about something scary, they can make an anonymous tip. Okay, so let's go to that other question. In addition to just call it a drill, is there anything you found to be helpful in working with the schools for kids with fear related to being stuck? Okay, I'm gonna give you two other things. Thank you so much, Joey, for asking that question. 2 points. Sorry. What I found was there was an enormous void in the training of teachers and staff on what to do during these drills. And included in that, I add that I found nobody talking about what to help the children cope when they're sitting in, that lockdown feeling, whether it's 10 minutes or 3 hours. Let's hope 3 hours never happens again. So that's where I believe that we can use this as an opportunity to teach mindfulness techniques. Don't have the kids close their eyes, but you can have, I use belly buddies as an example in my book for the little ones. You can put your hands on your belly and teach breathing. You put your hand on your heart, one on your belly, but teach them how to self-regulate while they're actually in that. And that's a practice that can help, if you're worried about flying or taking a test or sitting there. The second thing I found, and this adds to the overall anxiety of this topic, is anyone know what happens when that drill is over? Anyone know? The all clear comes, whether it comes over the PA system or some schools wait for the principal or police officer to bang and make sure that the door's locked. So sorry, allergies. Does anyone know what happens? I'll tell you what happens. Boom, all clear. Everyone has to jump out of their hiding place, put their rocks and bats and stuff away and go right back to work. Well, most of us know that that doesn't work. Like, I don't know, could you do that? I can't do that. Our cortisol's going, our adrenals, I have a whole chapter, what happens to the brain, which kids really like that part. And so I created what I call the 2-minute pause, and that after that drill is over, that the teachers would have 2 minutes for the kids, age appropriate, skip around the classroom for the little ones. Older kids could do yoga poses. I was doing a big training with 100 and something teachers one day, and I shared my 2-minute pause. And one teacher started yelling, like literally screaming at me that it was the stupidest thing she ever heard. And I went over to her and I'm like, please tell me why. And she said, the kids will start laughing. And I said, that's awesome. We just made kids think they were about to die or might die. I want them to laugh. That's a great way to release and refocus. So Joey, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's one part is that I feel like I don't want to label any kid who has anxiety around this. No, this is all anxiety. Then if we break it down to the layer, like a child who already comes to us with anxiety, a higher level of anxiety. Let me just read that question real quick again. I would also do, and this is part of the bill that I'm really proud of that passed, is that if any child who has any kind of special needs, whether it be heightened anxiety or any other special need, that just like in the IEP, we talk about, a lot of times, I hope we talk about like what happens to that child during a fire drill? How do we help that child survive and thrive during that experience? We need to include these lockdown drills as part of that IEP. Does anyone know if that's happening in your school district? Then that's one thing. And two is help, maybe that child who's really struggling has a safe item. Like the little boy I was talking about yesterday on this thing, as we started talking about scary stuff, he's like, hold on, Nance. And he runs and he comes back with a cozy blanket. And I don't know about you, but it was really hot yesterday. And he puts the cozy blanket around him. And I was like, I love it because he figured out a way how to self-regulate his anxiety, right? That was beautiful. Well, the kid might not be able, your child might not be able to do that in school, but what small item can they do? Do they have, you know, I have, if you saw my desk, I have all different kinds of fidget toys and things. You know, give them a squeezy ball, something. But the key here also, I'm talking on 2 levels, is that you talk about it ahead of time. Because what feeds our anxiety is that the child is probably afraid of being out of control. And here you're helping that child have things that they can do to help them feel in control. And at the same time, you're validating to them that, yeah, this is scary. This can be hard. I think that's huge. Just hope that helps. Let's see, one more question. Do you have any resources for children with special needs? Oh, I just answered. So for someone who may not understand what is going on, staying quiet is really difficult. So that's where for that child, you need, and I can help you with this, is have some really important conversations in that IEP. So it should be discussed in the IEP meeting, but it also should be, it should be written in their IEP. My husband happens to be a special needs attorney. And since I've done all this work, he has made sure that all his people have lots of really good things in their IEP. And it might be from one extreme that the child needs a heads up that there's going to be a drill. But my concern with that is, and I'd never advocate against that, is just like what happened in my community last week, there may be those times where it's a real lockdown. How do we help that child prepare for that? I've helped teachers come up with what we call like the emergency bag. So let's say that child has an aid. That aid should have an emergency bag, and in it might be whatever that child can do to self-soothe. Maybe it's a storybook, it's a fidget toy, it's da-da-da-da-da. So there's preparation. Does that help answer that question? So I know we could talk about this forever, but I believe as the social workers that there's so much we can do right now. And I invite you to join me because I need help. The goal is that we want to make, just call it a drill, a federal law. And right before I got on with you guys, I was on with Tom Malinowski's office and talking about, he's been a proponent of how can he help make this become a federal, and New Jersey's the first law to at least take steps in the right way. So now before we finish, I want to pull, because I gave you a ton of information in an hour, and I just want you to kind of feel your feet on the ground again, feel your hands, take some deep breaths, and feel this not as a way to be scared by this, but that you are powerful. We as social workers are enormously powerful and can make a difference. And I am here for any questions. If you want me to speak at your community's PTO, invite me in. I'm doing a ton of free things right now because I just think this is our time to talk about this. Is that good? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate your time today. I know you had mentioned a couple of other organizations that people could reach out to if they wanted more resources or ways to connect. Did you want to mention those organizations again?
So I'm putting Brady United, bradyunited.org it used to be the largest gun lobby in the country. It's named for James Brady, who was President Reagan's Secretary of State who got shot. Some of you are probably too young to know that. But Moms Demand Action is the other one, and I do volunteer with both. I speak with both. I love that they both have team groups. If you have a middle schooler who wants to get involved, I will take your child and help them. And I think this is really important to remember that we are not powerless. Like, of all the scary things happening in the world, this is something we can do something about. And a lot of times right now is that, and I'll end with this, is my argument, my 2-second elevator speech is, I am so glad there are people trying to protect our children's physical health. People like us, people like us need to be at the table. Do you know there's no mental health professional in the discussion when the school laws about lockdowns were made? Do you know, in even all the way the drills are done, there's nobody from our background. So my argument is we need to consider and include the child's emotional, mental, and physical health. So.
Thank you again, Nancy. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here with us today. I will be sending out the recording of this presentation, hopefully by the end of the day today. You all will be free to share that with your friends and colleagues and family members as you need to. And I'll also in that email include Nancy's website again and email address. And feel free to follow up with her if you need anything. Also, I see somebody in the chat mentioned this week is National Gun Violence Awareness Weekend. You can find events on weareorange.org, and you can wear orange. Also, next week, it's not something you need to register for, but we are going to be doing a Facebook Live discussion with the head of Brady United New Jersey next, I want to say next Thursday or Tuesday, perhaps.
Great.
Now I'm not seeing it, but we will be doing a Facebook Live discussion about gun safety and safe gun storage. So keep your eyes on social media for when that will happen. I'm sorry, I don't see the date on my calendar right now, but that is coming up very shortly. Thanks again all for being here, and we'll see you at our next
Thank you, Jeff, for
presentation.
all you do.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nancy.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.